Hello, and welcome to Blockchange Solidarity, the podcast where we ask what blockchain can do for us. What is blockchain? What is crypto? Could it rescue us from our current dystopia? Come with us as we explore the very real potential to enhance human freedom, and as we delve into the darker side, predicting the Bond-villain potential of this current bleeding edge. Join us, a group of friends, in a pub style as we discuss the overlaps between this technology and politics, economics, the environment, culture, and sci-fi, to understand for ourselves the seemingly mysterious futuristic world on our horizon. Bang, bang. Welcome back to Blockchain Solidarity, everyone. Hope you're doing well. It's been a few weeks since our last episode, where we had a great chat about everything DAOs, AI, and our new podcast alliance that we're building. So if you haven't checked that episode out yet, go back, check it out, listen to that one, and then dive straight into this one, because it's going to be a cracking episode. We're here with friend of the show, longtime friend of the show, Sardius. You'll know him from Twitter if you're in the crypto world. Sardius, my friend, good to have you back. How are you, buddy?
Hey, glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me. Doing good.
Yeah, you're still in the East Coast of America, aren't you? What's the weather like up there these days?
Humid as hell and even hotter.
Yeah, humid as hell is exactly how I would describe Thailand at the minute. I'm literally sweating. This bucket, I should put like buckets around me right now and just let the sweat drip into the buckets. It's
absolutely
crazy.
It's efficient,
Irish guy in Thailand, like just melting. But it's good to have you back, man. As always, we're gonna, folks, you know the format. We're gonna jump into just some topical articles, some topical themes that we like to discuss in the crypto world. Have some interesting takes on it, some things that we see that we like, some things that we see that we're a little bit worried by. So that's the way how it goes. We've picked 3 interesting topics for you this week. So, but before we dive into that, people in the crypto world are quite emotional these days, man. Yep. Don't you think? We're still in this bear market. It's been the longest bear market, I think, in the crypto world ever. And people are just fed up with it. You know what I mean? So the sooner we get out of this, the better. But people are, whatever angle, optimistic or pessimistic, there's no middle ground or very little middle ground in terms of emotions these days. People either hate crypto and think it's going in the wrong direction, or they're optimistic and just they're like, hang on, we're getting there. So I wanted to ask you, without thinking too much, what is the first word that comes to your mind about how you feel about the crypto world? Go.
First, you win some, you lose some. I know it's not maybe more than just one word, but it is. It always feels like any progress we get, there's always like something that kind of like comes up that's like up and then down again, up and then down. It's just kind of how like the whiplash is how it feels. So I'd say actually maybe like whiplash is. I feel like, you know, bouncing between sentiment. Although overall I'm super optimistic though, and even with all the challenges, let's say, in the space.
Yeah, you're thinking long term. Is that fair to say? You're trying to see over the horizon, and you're still optimistic about it. Is that fair?
Yep, yes, sir. Yeah, that's something like I've been involved in crypto, learning, earning, building for about like 9 years now. So it's like I just kind of out of just like my lived experience with it, have like a long term view, and I feel like a lot of the issues and stuff that I used to see back in the day actually have been worked on a lot and are improving, even though it feels very slow. But I feel like a lot of these things go on that kind of exponential curve where it's like it looks like nothing's happening for a really long time, and then it's like a lot all at once. And so I feel like this is one of those type of situations, although it can feel agonizing living through it though.
Yeah, it really can, like I'm in many different groups, and it does feel like people are just kind of going through a bit of pain, and that they're sick of that pain and they kind of want the good times to come. And hopefully, like, I think we are starting to see some rumblings of a bull market coming back, and all that brings obviously more money, more energy, more resources, more optimism back to the crypto space.
Absolutely.
So hold on, folks. The good times, or the sort of interesting development times, are a bit more positiveness is coming back. So yeah, okay. Thanks for those 4 words, but we'll take it.
Yeah, take 4 instead of 1.
Yeah, what's 4 words that come to your mind?
Exactly.
Well, I haven't got 4, but I've got 8.
Right.
So anyway, you've picked 2 articles, my friend, and I've picked 1. Let's go to the first one, which one you want to choose first, and which way you want to go with it. Yeah, you go first, and then we'll jump to mine.
Sure. All right. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, it's just like you were saying, Alex. There's a lot of cool. Like we're starting to see some things seem to turn around a bit, like some sort of like bullish sentiment come back. And I saw an article that was featured on CoinDesk about tokenize everything. Institutions bet that crypto's future lie in the real world. There's something near and dear to my heart, real world assets and their integration with Web3, although the article really dives deep into Wall Street's efforts to create tokens for everything. And I would say have less altruistic motives perhaps overall. And so that it was, I like the article is interesting because it's a cause that I find is a very positive one long term for this space. But in my opinion, if Wall Street being at the center of it might not be my favorite implementation of the idea. So yeah, just wanted to hear some of your thoughts on that too, Alex. What do you think about tokenizing things? Does that reek of like over hyper financialization? Do you see that as like a path to greater sustainability, greater inclusion, equity, those kind of things? Just wanted to get your thoughts on that too, man.
Yeah, that's you've actually just like narrowed straight in on where I'm struggling with this, because I do have 2 sides of me on this. Like, and just before we jumped on the pod, I seen like a friend of the show, Polar Punk Labs, had tweeted out some criticism of RWAs, as he describes them, as they're described, I should say, real world assets, and basically saying that it's the next kind of grift, potentially, if it's based around financialization on Wall Street. The next buzzword to get the system in. That was kind of his critique, and honestly, like I'm a little with you on the way you set that up there. Like I kind of feel like what Web3 offers in a way is this kind of there's this aspect of it that brings everyone in to just get their share, democratizing the way into the economy, for folks that can't afford to buy like massive amounts of stocks and how much it takes to get into the financial world that we're in right now, and it's bought and paid for by the big companies. Web3 offers that sort of like, okay, let's democratize this a bit. Can we do some of this together? Can we like easy access? I like that. Do you know what I mean? There's a side to that which is like, it sort of appeals to me. I don't like the aspect of just, okay, let's make money. Can we find a way to, I like the sort of long-term thinking. Right. I like the common ownership. Can we do it together? Can we do it sustainable? These kind of things. So I'm with it if it's that. And I don't see that as hyper-financialization. I see that as democratizing the economy. But this article got me worried in the way that you did. You just said where it's like, if that's the way Web3 is going, hyper-financialization, and Wall Street, and it's just centered around Wall Street and the big players doing this and that. I mean, if that's the way it's going, then that's probably the wrong way, it feels to me,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that when I'm reading about like Wall Street's version of tokenizing everything, a lot of it is ways to kind of increase liquidity in different asset classes, which is, I feel like games are going to play regardless of what happens, in the world or like with developments. But I think there's like beyond that though, like more interesting and even more valuable than just kind of taking the old system, putting a layer, shining the turd, if you will, putting a layer of like Web3 terms on top of it and repackaging it to play the same old games. That's not interesting to me really, although I kind of don't doubt that it will happen to a certain degree, right? And that is what it is. But I think, more interesting is tokenizing different types of, I'm not even going to say assets, but just different types of things that allow new types of paradigms of like community and wealth to form. And that goes far beyond just like another tokenized T-bill to trade, yet another type of like tokenized, like, I don't know, stock or some derivative or something. But like really, I mean, that's interesting for what it's worth in a DeFi perspective. But just as far as it goes for like actually accomplishing some of the goals of the space and redefining that wealth paradigm. I do see some very interesting things about creators owning their own IP in the form of tokens that wouldn't necessarily always be tradable on an open market unless that's what the creator wanted. But people defining what they want to like actually own and then how they want to use it and how they want to like congregate together in a community, that's super interesting to me. And I love that vision.
Yeah.
And that's something that, wasn't covered as much in the article, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting kind of like duality going on with it though.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I feel like those kind of things that you just mentioned aren't explored enough, but there's just like endless possibilities with them, and it doesn't have to be like money and sort of like, like, oh, I have a little bit of like this real estate or this T-bill, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
It can be like total ownership of your work. It can be total ownership of your work in common with your fans if you're an artist, or if you're like in a union, like do you hold things in common and whatever, like, do you know what I mean? Or it can be post money. It can be almost like, okay, I own this and I'm going to trade my ownership of this so that I can get access to 6 concerts in the next year. And you're just kind of trading value, what we place value on, but non-monetarily. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it can be open up new paradigms. I love this paradigms. You use the word paradigms. That is opening up new paradigms of how we think about value and what's valuable to us. I think Web3 offers that, but you just don't get it from this. I mean, the one thing I could pull from this article, and I got increasingly more depressed as I read it.
That's fair. That's fair.
These Wall Street terms, and then like private equity, public upside. You know what I mean? I guess the one thing, and this is the pragmatist in me, and the kind of like realist, as you rightly said yourself, is this is going to happen anyway, isn't it? In this article, I can't find it in the article now, but it basically said this is going to happen. Wall Street's going to get into this, and this is just part of the early adoption where Wall Street gets into it, but it's going to happen. It's going to have to happen for crypto to go mainstream. And then later on, when it matures and fertilizes, that's when all these different paradigms can happen. But we're coming out of the old system. Of course, the new system's going to have its fangs in this in some way. We're powerless to stop it. It's going to happen. It doesn't mean the end of the world long term, only if we throw up our hands and let them take over it long term. So that's the only optimism I could pull from that article. But I don't know if you have any last thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love your take, man. I think it kind of like, to me, it emphasizes like, it feels like something in Web3. It's like, we got to fight them from doing this. But really, like, a lot of this is just flat out outside a lot of our circle of control. I'm not trying to adopt some type of powerless mindset, but just really, it's going to happen. It's just kind of like the way of the world in a sense. However, that doesn't mean we shouldn't like fight for our vision. That doesn't necessarily mean it's like one or the other. It's the beauty, like the decentralization of the space. But it's like that vision that's not just completely dominated by centralized players. We gotta stick up and fight for that. Whatever that looks like. That's a important thing to me of like actually like maintaining that vision over time. So yeah, although slightly depressing, a nice call to action in some sense to stick to the values that lead to like the actual value we want to see created.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is some optimism to be taken from the sort of another like realist point of view, in that Web3 is going to democratize the economy. Like,
it's
when
coming.
You start offering the little guys to tokenize their work in this way, or, we group together in that way, that's going to be easier to do. And once that ball gets rolling from the bottom, that's going to be unstoppable. Because,
it is.
if people are motivated by incentives around building their wealth and getting more economically prosperous. And if that's built from the bottom up, that's a ball that's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So I have a lot of optimism, and that's kind of like that's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like that.
I feel that too.
Happen.
I feel it coming.
So let's. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's go on to the second article that we have. This is the one I chose. This is a Cointelegraph article, and it's entitled Andreessen Horowitz exec sees promising paths for Web3 social platforms at ETHCC. So this is this Ethereum conference that I believe is going on in France at the minute, in Paris. So my first question, I wanted, just before we dive into the article and some of the things that it talks about, I just wanted to set it in some context. And I wanted to just get your opinion on what you think is the current state of Web 2 social media. Like, a lot of people out there have a lot of strong thoughts on Twitter, on both sides of the debate about Elon Musk, and more recently we saw Facebook coming in with, is it Threads? I haven't been paying too much attention,
Threads.
but I just saw that. What do you think? Go ahead. What do you think about all everything that's going on Web 2 social media these days?
That's a great question. It's easy to be like, oh, it's all gone to shit. But in a like more nuanced take, I think like it's really like, it's just kind of the law of life that things change over time. Obviously, that's almost like saying nothing, but really, it's not a big surprise to me that the incumbents are kind of buckling under like business models and practices that got thrown together over a decade ago. We're living obviously in times of extremely rapid change, and we're seeing the strain of that as people have been leaving Twitter with all of the kind of like chaos with like Musk at the helm. Although it can be good or bad chaos depending on your perspective, it has like kind of deepened the trend of seeing a lot of siloing of people going into different social media platforms. And that's kind of also like not just related to Web3. It's sort of a bigger trend of people understanding that like they're the product to a certain degree and wanting a different sort of deal, which I think obvious to me at least, Web3 offers that, although it's still being built, quite a bit of it. But we're really seeing that there's a desire for that among, I think, the average user, that they want more control over their social media. They're starting to understand, they like thought it was one thing. Oh, this is about us. We have, like, it's my profile, but it's really they're the product and they're being used by the incumbents to profit off of. And, to put it frank, they're not getting any kind of cut for what they're producing. So that's, to me, an obvious like area that like Web3 can, I wouldn't say disrupt, but really in a sense just heal a flawed dynamic. And it seems to me in my head to be like somewhat easy, but as it goes with ownership and money, it never really feels like that in practice. But yeah, I think it's sort of, we're seeing the kind of natural like buckling of how like those platforms developed, and now they're sort of fragmenting as people's like desires and needs have changed over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of see, don't you, like, at least on Twitter, that there's some movement, I guess, from Musk in that I think now creators are getting their videos and their content monetized and they're getting some money. But I don't know how much it is, or if it's, whatever it is, you can be absolutely sure it's not as much as it should be. They're probably not getting rewarded anywhere near what they should be, of course. But I think it's a recognition at least. And whatever you think about Musk, I do think he sort of sees trends coming and tries to move with them. So I think, but it's a reflection of this move that people creating content now want their dues. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely,
as you rightly put. So I think we're starting to see that in Twitter, but I think Twitter won't be enough, and we'll have to go to Web3 for that. So I completely agree. We didn't mention Threads. I have no idea about Threads, but all I can say is whatever I think about Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg just seems like 10 times worse. Like Facebook just.
Who do I root for here, right? Yeah. It's like.
Yeah, we're not going to root for. Let's not spend any more time. So this article, I think, it's just basically what we said. It says, in addition, social network platforms started to have limited to no application programming interface support, low economic benefits for creators, and they do not allow users and creators to have a voice in terms of platform governance. I mean, I think that's maybe the difference between what I just said about where Musk is maybe gone with Twitter and what Web3 offers. Of course, it's going to, I believe, and you'd probably say the same, that Web3 is going to offer more economic benefits, more sort of power over control of what we earn as creators. But also that governance piece is overlooked as much.
Oh, it is.
Elon Musk is not going to be able to like decentralize governance on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't see
That's
that
not going to
happening. I
happen.
don't see that happening. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, how do you even begin to think that's going to happen? But Web3 is the difference there, and I think that's so important. Like, how important do you see governance just in general, maybe in the Web3 space and in spaces outside of Web3, governance in general as a crucial thing for sort of democracy in digital spaces?
I think it's super important. Like one of the trends I love in Web3 is how a lot of the like silos of different like areas, let's say in like the 20th century, that were like very separate are kind of blending together into new forms. I love when paradoxes mix and we get all kinds of crazy new creations in life. So I think that honestly, like a collective of creators that are like part of the governance of the platform, that get like they set the policies that they can benefit from, the community can benefit from. That's such a big paradigm change that the old world doesn't really know how to handle that. They always try to put a label on it, like, okay, well then that's this, or left wing versus right wing, or it's this or that. And I just think that sometimes the semantics aren't helpful for like the reality that we're like kind of experimenting and discovering new ways of working, but that we get to decide, in a sense, that the creators, the builders, get to build out new forms where there's actually more of an equal kind of give and take between, let's say, like the investors, builders, and users on a platform, or on like in a social platform, those who run the ads or use it for monetization, or who actually use it. There becomes more of a kind of a blurring and a new version that hasn't existed before. And I'm excited to see that, really. I know that there's a bit of work to go to actually have that all realized, but I love the builders working on stuff like that. I think it's very important, and it's going to really, as the 21st century goes on, it'll become increasingly seen as the norm, honestly, as these kind of older Web 2 incumbent business models are buckling under the strain of kind of what used to work, but isn't I don't know, is it really going to work as well as it used to going forward?
Yeah, I think that's so easily overlooked. And like, I think people, I don't know, like people just expect like things to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think what Web3 offers this kind of possibility of just not having one big social media platform that we all have to buy into. You can imagine if we all have a stake in governance, there will be a plurality of different social media platforms that take so many different interesting shapes and colors and forms that, you know, that will be built out by the people who are on it and passionate about it. And this one over here might be doing this and offer you these kind of incentives and benefits, and over there that may be like many different, like it's just so like you want to have just a marketplace of different pluralities of social media forums, and everyone can jump through and be themselves in different ways. But the only way you get there is if the people, the users and the creators and the developers who have a passion and a stake in it are saying what it's going to look like, and have that power to or else you're just going to have like a certain sect, a certain group across each one of them that are responsible for everything, and we know which way that will go. That will turn into bland kind of corporatism, kind of corporate verse where everything turns grey and the same sort of look.
Oh God,
it's like you know, it'll be like when you look at companies nowadays, companies look the same. It's the same forms. It's the same. It's top to bottom that they are the same thing. So I think governance is such a crucial part to what different diversity will look like in this space. And you know, some people might be like, you know what, I want my economic benefits, like material, money. That's what I want my payout to be as a creator. Over there, they could be like, you know what, I don't want it like that. I want it a different way. And it's just economic pluralities as well, I think, is crucial. So governance is just so important. The next point that this article makes, which I wanted to ask you about, man, is the guy kind of takes the point that, and I didn't think about this before because I'd always assumed that a Web3 social media would have to have economic financial incentives for the creators straight off the bat. You need it, that's like such a thing that's missing from Web 2 that Web 3 social would you'd need to get going at that straight away. But this guy makes the point that that doesn't have to come straight away. And if that comes straight away, the risk is that people aren't, as he puts it, I'll just quote, introducing money immediately puts the focus on the monetary element instead of just posting to have fun and bring communities together. And at the first time I read that, I was like, that sounds a bit like corporate speak to deny the creators the money that they're due.
For sure.
But also, and I do think that is the case. But there is a little bit of truth in there that we are social beings. Whilst we are motivated to get what we're due from our work, we are also motivated to post for fun, for community. So I think it's a crucial part to have that amongst it, but I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And I think that's maybe the takeaway from his point, that he makes it feel like they're mutually exclusive, where they don't have to be.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with it. I honestly, I think that there's, at a first glance, I get a little suspicious when it's talking about denying people that have actually produced and created the value the right to their own remuneration. I'm always suspicious of that angle. I'm like, oh, I wonder who sponsored this post to be written, right? But
you look back up and it's sponsored by
BlackRock. Great.
Yeah, you're like, oh, gotcha. BlackRock. All right,
but yeah, I think there is something to it though, in the sense of if the goal itself before anything, any kind of community or anything has been built, is you get paid to post. That really, because especially with the peer-to-peer nature of the space, it immediately leads to PvP, where we're kind of people are trying to get their bag more than they're trying to actually honestly engage, And I think that there's truth to it in that sense. I think that also though that kind of mindset is still we're talking about paradigms, is still sort of the same old school business model perspective, where these certain set of things can be quote unquote monetized, where there's just new ways of doing things that don't have to be so directly tied exactly to the just your baseline interactions with people, which I don't really feel like you want to be monetized. It kind of destroys the purity of the interaction in a certain degree, but there's still different ways that the creators can monetize their work and set their own terms and be remunerated in a way that isn't so in your face or destroys the quality of their interactions. So that's something that's definitely interesting to me, and I'd like to see. But I do see, I'm being generous, trying to see where they're coming from on that one for sure.
Yeah, and just whilst you were talking, I was thinking what are some of those forms that it could take? Do you know what I mean? And instead of I think when everyone thinks about this, it's oh, the monetization is just going to be folks scrolling on their say Twitter feed kind of thing, and if they like a post, by clicking the like button, I don't know, your wallet sends 0.0005 BTC to a creator, and that's fine. But you're right, and I guess that's better than what we have, because you want to support people's creative content or whatever. But I think there's just that's almost like the next version, or maybe that's the primary elemental thinking that you would get to out of what we have. But imagine a group of creators, 10 in the same, who are creating kind of the same content, grouped together, and what you did, if you liked their content, you kind of said, look, I'm gonna make a donation to you guys, or platform you guys on my thing, on my platform, and that way we mutually support each other for the next kind of 3 months, and my supporters will like you, or I don't know, some sort of form of mutual cooperation that is non-necessarily financial, but still backs each other. We had this conversation because we were talking about our podcast alliance that we're trying to build, And Eves, who has his own podcast, friend of the show, he's been on a couple of episodes on Blockchain Solidarity Pod, and he was like, you know what, this podcast Alliance could just, in its first stages, be about like sharing editors, or background people who do social media. Like, how about we just cross over and support each other in that way, or some researchers, we'll like share. So there's just like a multitude of ways that we could cooperate and share together. And you're right. These kind of elementary ways of thinking about it are maybe too much in the business mindset. So that's a really good point. That's really the main points I wanted to bring out of this article from Cointelegraph. Folks, check it out yourselves. Have a think about what you think about it. This is coming down the pike. Social media on Web3 is going to be where we are in a few years. So it's important that everyone gets ahead of this and gathers their own thoughts about it, because by all means, it's coming down the pike sooner rather than later. Shall we jump to your second article, man? What have you got for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Like one quick thought before we wrap it, just because like what you were saying was sparking a lot of thought in me. I was like, man, it's on point. But yeah, like I think it's funny how like the financial or like the monetization that gets talked about sometimes in the articles is the exact type of way like Web2 users have been monetized. And it's like, oh, beware of doing the same thing again to other people. And I think that's sort of like hilarious and telling in a way. But yeah, I'll just like leave that thought. Like,
That's true.
But I love the new.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, man. So, but yeah, the last article I got to take a look at was one kind of on like a big macro trend that I thought had a lot of like, it's just interesting pieces of everything playing into it. And it's from Cointelegraph too. And the EU stays on top of Web3 with metaverse, AI, and crypto strategies. And it's just talking about over the past year that the European Union has been vocal about their desire to stay on top of the latest developments in Web3. And it's such a, I'm in the US and the East Coast, and it's reading the article, it felt like a crazy, entirely different world from how negatively it gets talked about in discourse in the States. And I thought, on one level, it's a good thing, right, that they actually are clarifying regulation, trying to support the space. On the other hand, I am always like wary of centralized entities trying to like overly dominate and color the space,
right,
and accidentally like kill the golden goose without understanding what they're doing. So I think that there's a lot of nuances in the article. It's definitely cool to see some support on one level. Also, like taken with a grain of salt that we still got to stand up for like the values that are important for us in the space. But yeah, man, I want to hear your thoughts on there's like that legislation, the MiCA framework, the clarified assets, and the European Union just supporting their version of the metaphors, calling it Web 4, which I always think is funny how much people get kind of tied up with the semantics in the space. But yeah, just want to hear your thoughts about that, man.
Well, it's that last thing that was the main point that I wanted to bring out. So this Web 4, I've never heard of Web 4 in my life. I mean, like, I was like, oh. And I see in the article, like, they posted like a tweet from someone. So the EU had posted about what the work that they're doing on their Twitter or something. And below it, someone went, Web 4? What is it like?
Right.
Wait, Web 4? What about Web 3? I feel like we skipped that entirely.
Yeah, just skipped
Am
it.
I wrong?
I think they'd somewhat like us to skip it. Yeah, like because we're targeting their models, right? Like,
well, in a way, it's funny and mind-boggling, but also in a way, it kind of brings me back to the point I wanted to make about this overall. Is in a way, like and as a European, like the EU for so many folks nowadays feels like just this kind of cold entity that just sits above us all, this supranational entity that is closed off from the public, and they hold these meetings where they'll come up with their papers and their strategy documents, and in a way, Web 4, like. And this, like, what's Web 4 is like just indicative of what the EU would say.
Gotcha,
They're like, they're off on their own, creating like what their new words and their new terms, and like it's like, well, wait, down here we're all talking about Web 3, and we're excited about that and what that offers, and Meanwhile, you're coming out with your fancy documents talking about Web 4,
Right.
and there might be something. There might be even before you get into what Web 4 is and what they mean by it. It just feels a little bit like, well, like we like that's just like we're not talking about that. So like, whose trend or whose mindset are you following? Like, I just felt it alienated me a bit.
Yeah.
I was like, typical EU with their fancy bureaucrats coming up with something like that nobody else is talking about in the Web3 space. So it felt like alienating. So I think that's a crucial part. Like these entities, oftentimes or most of the time, are just off doing their own thing. But I do like this regulation. Like I feel like the same as what you said. We're gonna have to find something that we disagree on.
Yeah.
But at the moment, like, we're on the same wavelength. Again, it's that realism where there is going to be regulation. We need to play a part in making sure that these let's be honest, corporate influenced regulators, like anyone who thinks regulators aren't backed by major corporates and the big financial entities, is living in a different planet from the one I'm on anyway. So how do we influence it in any way to be positive? But at the same time, I agree with so many libertarian-minded people in the crypto space that no matter what it is, ultimately it's going to be not great. You know what I mean? Because it's centralized. So honestly, I know that's kind of a macro take.
Yeah.
I haven't been close enough to the micro detail of what they're doing exactly, but that's where I'm at. Yeah. What did you think? What about specifically this Web 4? Had you heard about it before? Like, what do you think they're getting at with this? Like, what's your thoughts on this Web 4?
I thought that your take was very prescient in the sense that like it just felt exactly to me like someone that's not even in the space, wanting to like coming in, not understanding our culture and memes, and being like, oh, we have our better term that isn't even from the community. And I thought that was kind of funny, but typical. But like what they're taught, like the details of the trend though, of like incorporating like Internet of Things, like AI, Web3, like all the different types of like tokenization of real world assets, redefining ownership, and they're terming that Web 4. But that's something that like I've really been excited for a long time in the space of like seeing that kind of like, that's like almost like the more of what I consider the metaverse, not this like corporate VR. Is it a nightmare? I don't know. Like where you're like locked in some like Zuckerberg corporate hellscape on your face, but I'm just kidding. But like really like, I think that the kind of integration of like online, offline, and the blurring of that, and what it means to like own certain things of like what your data does and is, I think that's like very exciting, and one of like the things I've long wanted to see in the space. Semantics aside, I don't see that like purely coming through a government entity, although they can play a part, but I also feel like their efforts definitely got to be taken with a grain of salt, and like we have to understand that like our values have to be like stood up for, and not just expect that to be taken care of by like some big government entity, big corporate entity. Because like you said, there's a lot of like opaqueness, lack of transparency about who's driving these efforts. Like that's something you gotta, you just say easily like follow the money, but really like look at the incentives. I mean, hopefully it's good, but at the same time, I've learned to not really expect that a lot of the time in this space, because it involves a lot of like central paradigms of power, like money, ownership, technology. So yeah, like definitely interesting, kind of silly, but the underlying like trends that they're actually talking about that comprise it, I am excited to see become a reality, but just maybe, defined by us from the ground up, not necessarily from the top down. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't be more in agreement. All of that, like the next year, I'll just read their quote for folks who can check out the article later. We'll put it all in the description for the episode as well, so you can find it real easy. But just quoting from the article, the next generation Web 4.0 will allow an integration between digital and real objects and environments, and enhanced interactions between humans and machines. And I think that is, as Sardius just said, that's following the trends that we are going in. So it's like, I mean, if we had, in a sense, like if we had governments that were just not talking about this at all, it'd be like, oh, come on, like this is the world. This is an exciting new world. We do need to be talking about it. So it is important that this is on the agenda. That is a positive. And I think the it goes back to maybe what we were saying earlier, isn't it? That with Wall Street and tokenization, this is going to happen. This is like the start of this process, and these inevitable trends of grassroots democratic economy and blockchain, as we said earlier, are inevitable. Like the zeitgeist of the times, or the lack of democracy in all of these kind of public spaces, people are going to demand more of a say. And that is like a zeitgeist that is just unstoppable. So I kind of feel like, yeah, the EU can have their little say, have their regulation. It will be corporate backed and corporate led, market led, profit led, all the rest of it for now. And yes, we have to tame that as best we can for now. But I think it's inevitable in like a year or two, as this space matures, and as like all these kind of decentralization matures, and we do take more of a part in it. These centralized entities, they're not going to have a say as much as they do now. You know, that is inevitably going to dwindle. So I find myself being a little bit right now, but it's inevitable. It is going to go this. I just feel optimistic that it is going to go that way. So don't worry about it too much. Don't stress too much. I did want to ask you about one thing on this article, and it was the last thing I said in that quote. And enhanced interactions between humans and machines. And I just like I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while, because we've had these chats about the AI on the pod. You know, people have different opinions about AI. We talked about it a lot on the last episode of BSP. And what do you think about AI? Does it scare you? Like, it's, you know, like ChatGPT. What do you think? Like Elon Musk is scared shitless about it. Some other folks are. I know, like this guy who's running for president, RFK Junior, seems to be scared about it. Other people are like, come on, not to be scared of. What do you say? Where's your feelings on AI in general?
So it's it definitely obviously interesting topic. I find that, like, you know, the current kind of way like our discourse algorithms get structured, very extreme takes get kind of like bubble to the top. So either it's like folks that are like, oh, come on, don't worry about a single thing, like, just, it's all good, let's do all the AI we can, like, come what, like, devil take the hindmost, come what may, all in AI everything. And then there's the other folks that are like, it's going to literally destroy the world. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, we have to do something to stop this impending apocalypse, of which there's many competing ideas of what that's going to look like, right? Like AI, climate, you take a pick, right? So I take that with a grain of salt too. I try to take a more like, I like to experience things, learn from experience, kind of get my hands dirty and figure it out. Like, I've tried a ton of AI tools. I use ChatGPT as part of my workflow with a lot of my consulting work and development work, and it's really helpful for that, although it's not the end-all be-all, obviously. I think I try to take a more like try to take a balanced approach. You know, I think to some of the more extreme takes, that would be annoying, but I think that it's a fantastic tool used in the right context. Obviously, it needs some kind of like, not just letting it all run loose, let's let the market decide. It's kind of a different sort of invention that's come before. It's character changing in some ways, in that it's allowing intelligence to somewhat be automated to a certain degree. Like, I'm not for anything that's going to like automate away humans into nothingness, but also I see a lot of like really big positive potentials to kind of get us out of some of the more like soul-crushing exploitative work that like a lot of people get caught up in. But then a lot of times that can be even controversial, because it's like, oh, well, then what are they going to do for jobs? I think it's going to, of course, create a lot of new types of jobs and different things that haven't existed yet, especially when you start combining it with different technologies like evolving space technology, biotech, regenerative climate technology, Web3. There start to be a really like kind of not really imagined except in sci-fi type of combinations, I think, are going to come out. And that's going to like be more of an issue of how do we like integrate all that, more than it's going to destroy the world overnight, or we automate everything and we all live in like a luxurious place where we don't do any work again. I find that both to be a little bit like ridiculous, you know, for me. But like, yeah, so I try to take a more balanced experiential approach to it.
Well, that's interesting that you said that, because I saw a quote recently, I can't remember who it was by, and it was, "The future of work is no work." And that was like interesting, because a lot of people in some of the circles that I run in and all the rest of it, that take this kind of sci-fi outlook on what's coming in the world. And they're like, okay, if we're replaced by AI and robots and so much of the work, that's nothing to be scared of. It's only something to be scared of if people are left on the breadline and can't afford to live. And then we have all sorts of societal problems, obviously, with mass unemployment and all the rest of it. But, if we can find some solutions like universal basic income or some sort of options where people outside of work aren't screwed, basically, and there's some material ways to earn through creative work or I don't know, something else, then I think AI becomes a lot less scary. And I am pretty optimistic that rationality will set in and people will not want hundreds of millions of people out of work, knowing that what will happen. So I think we will get some sort of solution like that. So I'm not too scared about that on that side. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, just on the will AI take over humanity and destroy us argument, is I kind of was thinking as you were talking there, it was like, well, what's the other big scary thing in the world where it's like we've built this technology and it could destroy humanity in seconds? And that's nuclear technology, right? Nuclear weapons. How long have we had, and I'm going to temper this, I'm going to set out both sides here. Well, we've had that technology for 60 years, and we haven't had okay, of course the US has bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but we haven't had an all-out nuclear war. And that's not to say it couldn't happen, but we haven't had it yet. And we came in the 1960s close to it, but like John F. Kennedy and Khrushchev, they got together and they stopped it. So there's a bit of hope there that humanity can stop the worst instincts, and faced with the precipice, we can step back from it. I feel like with AI, if it ever came to the breakout moment, there would be some, humanity would get well, no, fucking hell, no, we're not letting this happen, and we'd pull back. Then the other side of that argument is actually that there is some crazy people in the world that might take their technology and break it out to the dangerous point. All it takes is a few crazies to get us to that stage. So I guess the jobs risk I'm less scared about, but I am kind of weary that something crazy could happen on the breakout and destroy humanity side. But again, I don't know too much about this space. This all might be fear-mongering. We're a long way off, I think. And I've rambled on a good bit now. I don't know what you think about that.
Dude, I think that's a great point, honestly, that in the sense that, that breakout moment, stuff could go down. Stuff could happen, just like it could have happened in the 60s with nuclear weapons. There's a very, just because it didn't, it's easy for us to be like, oh, it was never going to. But, it could have. It definitely, through the Cold War, stuff could have happened. So I'd say it's very similar, and it has to be understood that's a real risk that we're dealing with. But I'm a student of history, and I really feel that, while definitely people, I think it's naive to assume there won't be anyone that would try kind of negative actions, or there are a few crazy people wouldn't try to take it in a non-beneficial direction. I do think that ultimately, in aggregate, rational heads will prevail, and I don't think it would get to that point. It's easy enough for me to say right now. I think that there's a lot of points in favor of that outcome. The rational good outcome is that a lot of the doomsday scenarios are we're getting back to paradigms again, right? Are layering on current AI developments with a 20th century or even 19th century mindset of computing labor and money. And AI would wipe that world out. No shit. But at the same time, we don't live in the past. We live now, and there's a lot of competing developments with AI that don't completely defang it, but are just not exactly would let it run rampant in the sense that we have NFTs, not in the sense of just trading the current the version that we saw even in 2020 on an open market, but people owning their data and profiting every time their data is used in a large language model, and legal cases pending on that aspect of when models have scraped people's personal work and profited from it without them being any recourse. I mean, we're going to start to see less incentive for companies to do that when they get sued to death in court and have to actually pay creators every time their data is used in a micropayment in a model, or quantum computing enabling us to have like counter models or counter different types of AI, even if one got out of the box. And so I just think that there's a lot of just kind of interesting things that are going to develop with it to make like the vision, because I feel like a lot of it's just like us like kind of imagining the Matrix or Terminator 2, you know, and it just, that's like our vision for this like dystopian future, and we take all our inventions and fit that into that box. And so I think
right, yeah, you know, you're probably right, yeah.
And I just feel like truth might, the reality might be a little more interesting, at least hopefully. You know, I could be wrong, but yeah, we will definitely see.
Reality is a little less Hollywood than some of us would maybe expect. That's a good point to end on, I think. Reality is a little less boring than Hollywood, and it's a little more nuanced and complex. You're right. And it goes back to the same thing we've been talking about throughout. I think with blockchain, with Web3 tooling, with all this new tooling and the democratic trends, people are going to be demanding that they get their share and they're not exploited anymore. And if there's technological tools that can play on that side of the equation too, so that people can like enable those demands in an easier, efficient, more technological way, then the kind of big guys are, you know, less of a competitive advantage. Let's put it that way. So all these trends are going. I think there's reason to be optimistic. Anyway, let's end it there. It was a great discussion. Really, I feel like we could really talk about like these topics endlessly.
Oh, yeah.
But there's just so much there. But let's end it there on that note. I should say, folks listening, forgot to say at the start, Sordius is going to be like a co-host with me on the pod. We'll do. Obviously, we've been doing it every 4 weeks. Sordius is going to join now. Glad he's jumping on board. Love riffing with him, and of course, it's just me and him on this one for now. We thought it would be a really nice one to do together because we're going to be co-hosting the pod together. But as we have been doing, we're going to be joined, as usual, by some of our hosts, some friends of the show, some special guests, some even of our contributors who aren't hosts and who have a voice as well that we love the platform. It's up to us how we want to do it going on. Sardius, we can pick the topics.
Awesome.
We'll get people together. But I'm excited for it. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to both of us on this episode. And yeah, it's exciting, man. Well, I'm really happy to have you a part of the journey.
I'm stoked, man. I'm grateful to be here, grateful for the opportunity, and I'm stoked to have the conversation keep going, man. It's been amazing talking, and I'm looking forward to getting other folks on here and just, keeping going, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there's so many interesting things happening in the crypto world, and we've talked about AI and everything. So yeah, really interesting conversations to come. Thanks for joining, folks. Thanks for listening. Next episode, as I say, will be in 4 weeks. And yeah, I look forward to having another great conversation. Sordius, enjoy your afternoon, I believe it is. It's evening for me over here in Thailand, so I'm gonna get on and get some dinner and join some friends. But have a great afternoon, my man, and thanks for joining.
Cheers, man. Yeah, you have a good evening, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.